bid you welcome, or welcome back. Today I'm showing you the process of me making this watercolor painting of this spider that is a mount with a whole little traveling card saddle made out of mushrooms. My most complex and hardest watercolor piece I made by the time I started this. I made this for Meb's Drawing Club 2025, a drawing challenge consisting of 31 Halloween-related prompts. I combined 3 prompts I randomly selected: Web, Ghost Rider, and Mushroom. Also, I'm kind of doing a different video format this time, so tag along to see. First step of the process was making some thumbnail sketches in a sketchbook after I had a pretty solid idea already. You can also see there's not much difference in many of these beyond the composition and some design changes. Seeing the prompts, I immediately decided that I want a mysterious rider traveling on a spider with mushrooms serving as both a seat and this whole shelter-like roof held together by spider silk, lit by the low light of some hanging lanterns. My biggest divergence from the original was turning the characters but not the composition upside down in one of the sketches, but that would mean losing the giant saddle, and it would work if there were multiple small spiders traveling along the big one that carries more items, but I decided to focus on just one this time. Then of course I made a bigger sketch with accurate measurements to my paper to really prevent myself from having to figure all of this out afterwards. Then here I am taking a photo for later, before doing a really quick value study on top of it with graphite to overall see where the distribution of light will be before using a very useful trick for the colors. Here I spent a horrible 20 minutes over explaining what I was doing. You know, my recording as usual. In order to prepare for the painting, I colorized my sketch digitally in the art program named Krita, which is free and open source, and with a Huion drawing tablet. But you can also do this with a mouse on PC, or you can use programs like IBIS Paint on Android to do pretty much the same. I took a picture of the sketch before the shading, added a levels filter and a multiply mode to make everything but the black lines transparent, and painted under it with colors. I could also separate the background for a much easier trial and error process to see how different colors will look. Also, I did make a purely digital sketch for the rider, mainly inspired by Count Orlok disguising himself as a stagecoach in the original Nosferatu. By the way, if you just exited some establishment at 2 AM and the 2 drivers trying to pick you up were Max Schreck's 1922 Nosferatu stagecoach and Bela Lugosi's 1931 Dracula stagecoach, which one are you picking? After having bought a traditional value sketch and a digital color template for me to use, it was time to put it on the final piece of paper, now like 2 hours into the project. And as usual, I used the watercolor pencil to make a sketch and activated it with some water to get a basic underpainting too. I also used this blue pencil to leave some traces of blue moonlight of the scene appearing everywhere. Then comes the first scary part, adding any of the colors. I'm using watercolor, a pretty cheap set of 24 pre-mixed colors that are not as easy to work with as other paints I tried before, but I like using this set. Worrying less about mixing the different colors I want to use is really helpful for me, who barely started watercolor like 10 months ago in January, even if the quality of these paints is a little questionable. I'm inserting a picture here to show how this entire pack of 24 tubes costed about as much as 3 tubes of these higher quality black and white paints, one of which I actually used later on to add a higher quality white for some of the spider silk. Now, while the time-lapse is rolling, I mentioned before how this is a slightly different format. What I'm doing right now is typing down a longer script into a document about this entire challenge and my story with it through the years, so here we go. The first time I participated in Meb's Drawing Club was in 2020, making 23 digital paintings. I'm horrified to think about the fact that by the time I attended that, I had been drawing and painting for less time than how much time passed in between 2020 and now. You might not know this about me, but I started digital drawing in 2017 at the age of 19 and started traditional drawing only in 2023, so I pretty much did the opposite of most creators I ever talked to through the years, but I imagine the younger generation who very often started by drawing on their phones, it might be increasingly less true in the future. There is a video yet to be made about how I was deterred from getting into drawing by a few unfortunate influences from elementary and middle school, even if all my little generic public school educators always try to encourage me, but that is not for today's video. So what I did back in 2020 was participating in this challenge for the first time, completing a bunch of shorter paintings where I just got a simple prompt to work from. Back in the day, I was using a 1:1 canvas ratio and a single brush for everything. That was not the best, but it certainly gave those works a unique feeling and helped me figure out more things out of the technical level, with some of those pieces being among my favorites to this day, and some of them aging really horribly. A year later, in 2021, same aspect ratio, slightly different brush, and I decided to make every piece animated, adding a little effect, a little fog, a little snow or dust particles, even some actually moving bits. I just followed a bunch of tutorials on YouTube to figure out how to make those effects myself in Blender, and then I just composited them together later with the final version of my two-dimensional painting. Really, the main reason I'm not doing that with every picture I make is sadly you can't just easily present that to anyone. It's not like a single PNG they can just open and zoom around in. You either save a video format or a GIF that compromises a lot of image quality. Either way, unless you include that as part of an animatic or in a video or somehow something, sadly it is not a thing people will care for, so I kinda just stopped making those and decided to focus on making my simple 2D works better. 2022 was a huge year for me. I broke with the idea of just making simple little pictures and some animations. I decided to combine all of the pictures into one giant canvas. I have 2 videos about it that nobody ever saw. Also, it's from the era when I spoke like this and I was completely cisgender, so it's quite dated, sadly, I would say. But I did it. I combined all of them into the biggest picture I ever made, and I was really happy with it despite the many individual little issues and imperfections I had. That project was a blast to make, especially with hiding all the references to different media through the picture. And also, if you look at my self-portrait from that year, I would say that you can interpret many things into it. 2023 was possibly the most ambitious of them all, making a collection of 30 fake tarot cards. By that I mean cards that are not part of the deck, like the Bride, the Cure, or the Contract, which is literally my profile picture to this day with the little modifications. Many different scenes with all sorts of inspirations and goals, all combining into something even bigger, and I have 2 videos about that project too that nobody saw. 2024 was a different story on the other hand. I won't get into much of it beyond the fact that me being in a period of a lot of personal change that hindered my ability to make huge projects. And right now I do have a project in the works that is bigger in scale than either one of those, but I doubt that I will ever put that much effort into a single piece ever again, with both of those huge ones being about 250 hours each. So last year I decided to scale back a lot, make ones I want to make, do some drawing with graphite, some more with ballpoint pen, most of them still digital, and once again with a 1:1 ratio I haven't used in years by that point. I even made this one picture that I made with the exact same brush that I was using back in 2020. But I never ended up sitting down to make proper videos about that project. I still have the recordings, and there are at least 3 or 4 pictures I'd like to actually talk about, so it's not impossible that I'll make a video about them eventually. But it was unfinished, all over the place, not my best works either, but about the project it was the kind of project I really did have a good time working on. That's also how we arrived to this year, where I barely did a few, one proper one digitally that I released earlier this week, along with a few watercolors that fit the season, if not being for the prompt list directly. Okay, I wanted to stop here for a second and do an update. So I would say that I'm mostly done with the stuff. I will definitely add some more details here and there, but right now I'm really occupied with the thought that all of those will have much more sense once I add all this spider silk, because without that this whole picture seems pretty empty. And I was wondering how to do the spider silk thingy, and you know, I was just looking at my palette and I realized that I have this lump of a white that is left over from a different project where I was mixing it with a whole bunch of blue. So what will happen in this environment is I can mix it with blue, and I will make like an underpainting for the little strands of silk with this color, and possibly even use this one as the main part of it, or as a backup I do have this tube of white paint that I can use directly, like straight out of the tube without mixing it with water. And then in the end I will do the highlights of it with this gel pen, which is also going to be used for adding more highlights, for example the highlights around the character's clothing. And then we will very clearly see what is left to do, what are the parts that really require some more work. And also this is going to be used for painting the white little dots on the mushrooms. That will really make them feel like mushrooms, because now they just look like little limbs of thingies. Also, I have no idea when I did that little thingy there. That's weird. And most likely I will use the gel pen to add some more light rays. Oh, and also I will need to paint in the lanterns. I totally forgot about those as well, but that will come afterwards. So let's continue by mixing out this silk color here, and then we will add them and we will see it much more clearly and we can progress with it. I think the spider silk went actually easier than I expected. I did manage to make the underpainting, or it would more like be the base layer with just the light blue and white mix. I kept it thick enough so it mostly covers everything below it. Then I added a second layer of just white after the first one was already dry. Then after both were dry, I went in with the gel pen to add a really opaque white that is also a little fuzzy, so these ropes of silk have more texture to them. Then I also added a bunch of highlights all over the picture with it to add finishing touches, and it was pretty much done after a few little extra adjustments that followed just everywhere, along with adding the cast shadows of the ropes. And after all of that, there is only one thing left. That is the short version of what I did for this challenge every year since 2020, and I will 100% revisit the challenge in the future if it continues, but for today this is really the big traditional watercolor entry I did for the challenge this year, and honestly, with all its imperfections, this might be the one watercolor piece I made so far that I'm the most proud of. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day, create something, even if it's just actually, I should not belittle this picture because this is like the most complex watercolor painting I've ever done. So especially if it's like a great milestone that you can do with your creations, even if it looks very scary, because it will be worth in the end. Was that sentence correct? I don't know. But most importantly, don't forget to have fun while doing that. Farewell and happy Halloween.